The wind howled through the streets of Blackthorn, a city of stone towers and shadowed alleys. Rain fell in sharp sheets, drumming against the roofs like the sound of 1,000 restless hearts. Among the chaos of the storm, a small figure struggled forward, clutching a bundle tightly to her chest. The child's soft cries echoed against the stone walls, mixing with the rhythm of the rain. Her name was Ilara, and the weight she carried was heavier than the storm itself. Ilara's life had been a series of losses. Her father, a man of quiet strength, had died when the debts of his past caught up with him. Her mother had vanished before she could remember her face. And now, with only her infant son to protect, she was being sold at the auction of the city's forgotten and desperate. The thought of it made her stomach churn. But there was no time to resist. She had no allies, no weapons, and no choice. The auction hall was a towering building of dark stone, its windows high and barred. Torches flickered along the walls, casting long, trembling shadows. Men in cloaks whispered to one another, their faces hidden beneath hoods, while others laughed with cruel delight. They were here to see the powerless bought and sold, and today's prize was more unusual than most a woman with a child. Ilara's steps faltered as she entered the hall, her eyes scanning the crowd. She clutched her son closer. The child's small fingers clung to her tunic, and his wide eyes looked up at her, full of trust she had not earned. She whispered his name softly, a prayer in the storm. "Bren, stay close, my love. We will survive this." The auctioneer stepped forward, his voice sharp and commanding. "Today, we have a rare acquisition. A young woman, alone, and a child. A fine opportunity for those who seek loyalty or power. Who will start the bidding?" The crowd shifted, murmuring and sizing her up. Ilara felt every eye on her like needles against her skin. Fear and anger warred within her. But she forced herself to stand tall, even as her knees threatened to buckle. She would not cry here. Not in front of them. Not yet. Then, a figure entered the hall, and the room fell almost silent. A man, taller than any others, moved with a presence that seemed to bend the very air around him. His hair was dark as midnight, and his eyes glowed faintly, catching the torchlight with an almost unnatural intensity. There was something in his stance, something commanding, something impossible to ignore. He was Kalen, the Lycan king, ruler of the northern forests and master of beasts and men alike. Legends spoke of him in hushed tones. The king who could walk in shadow, the wolf who could shift at will, the immortal who had seen centuries pass like seasons. And now, he was looking directly at Ilara, as though he could see through every layer of her fear, every secret she tried to hide. Ilara's heart stuttered, but she would not look away. Her son whimpered, sensing the tension in the room. Kalen's gaze softened slightly as he stepped closer. The crowd murmured, some in awe, some in fear. "I will take her," Kalen said, his voice deep, calm, and filled with authority that made the hall fall silent. "I will be father and husband both." The word struck Ilara like a thunderclap. Father and husband? What did that mean? Her mind spun with questions and fears, but she could see no mercy in the eyes of the men who had gathered to watch her fate. Only Kalen seemed to offer some strange, quiet promise. Within moments, the auction was over. The child clutched her neck as she was led through the rain-soaked streets to the castle on the edge of the northern forest. The castle loomed like a dark sentinel, towers reaching into the clouds, and the sound of distant wolves echoed through the trees. Inside, the castle was alive with shadows and whispers. Torches lined the walls, but they could not chase away the chill that clung to the stone. Servants moved silently, their eyes downcast. Kalen led Ilara and the child through winding corridors, finally stopping at a room that seemed both grand and isolated, its windows high and overlooking the forest. "Rest here," he said simply, placing a hand on the child's tiny shoulder. "He is safe. You are safe. For now." Ilara nodded, unsure what to say. Words felt useless. Instead, she focused on Bren, brushing the damp hair from his forehead. Kaelin's presence was still there, heavy and commanding, yet strangely protective. She could not understand it, but she felt a thread of hope forming, thin and fragile as it was. Days passed in the castle, each one a mixture of tension, fear, and cautious observation. Kaelin watched her often, silently, as if weighing her strength and spirit. He taught her the rules of the castle, of his court, and of the forest beyond the walls. At first, his methods were strict, unyielding, and terrifying, but he never harmed her or the child. Slowly, Elara began to see the complexity behind the legend. The man who could command beasts and kings was bound by his own codes and curses. And beneath his cold exterior, there were hints of care and understanding. One evening, Kaelin entered her chamber without announcement. The moonlight spilled through the high window, silver and cold. Bren slept peacefully in her arms, and for a moment, Elara felt the weight of the world lift, replaced by a fragile calm. "You fear me," Kaelin said, his voice softer than before. "And you should. I am not gentle. I am not kind. But I will protect him. And you, if you let me." Ilara's eyes met his, searching for the truth. He knelt beside her, keeping his distance but closing the emotional gap with his presence. Because strength is measured not by power alone, but by what you protect. You have survived what no one else could. That deserves respect. A silence followed, filled with unspoken words and emotions that neither could yet name. Outside, the storm raged, but inside the castle, there was a fragile sanctuary, built on respect, fear, and the first faint threads of trust. But peace was fleeting. The next day, whispers of rebellion reached the castle walls. Humans and Lycans alike questioned Kaelin's decision to take in a woman and her child. Some saw it as weakness, others as a challenge to the natural order. Elara sensed it before Kaelin spoke. Shadows moved differently in the hallways. Eyes watched her from corners. And Kaelin's own aura darkened, the faint glow of his eyes warning that the wolf within him stirred at the scent of danger. "You must be ready," Kaelin said quietly, as he helped her secure the baby in her arms. "The world will not accept what we have. You are part of this now, whether you want it or not. And so am I." Fear and courage mingled in Ilara's chest. She could not turn back now. The storm of destiny had carried her into the Lycan King's realm, into a life that promised both danger and protection, fear and longing. And as the night deepened, she felt a chill that was not from the cold, but from the knowledge that her fate and her heart was entwined with a man who was both monster and king. Outside, the wind howled once more, carrying with it the scent of forests, storms, and the wildness of untamed power. Inside, Elara held her son close. And for the first time in months, she whispered, not just a prayer, but a question. What is he planning? And what am I becoming? The castle doors creaked in the wind, and a shadow moved silently across the stone floor. Kaelin watched from the darkness, eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight, his expression unreadable. The storm outside mirrored the storm within, and the story of Elara, Bren, and the Lycan King was only just beginning. The night seemed endless, filled with whispered fears and unknown destinies, leaving one certainty: nothing would ever be the same again. The castle of Kaelin, the Lycan King, was a place where silence spoke louder than words. High stone walls, thick with centuries of history, loomed over the forest, and the corridors twisted like the roots of some ancient tree. Every step echoed, carrying the weight of legends, power, and unspoken rules. Elara moved carefully, holding Bren close to her chest. The baby's small fingers wrapped around hers, a constant reminder of why she could not falter. Days had passed since the auction. Each day brought new lessons about the castle, about the rules Kaelin expected her to follow, and about the strange duality of the king himself. He was both fearsome and protective, commanding and patient. The more she observed him, the more she realized that beneath his wolfish exterior lay a man bound by duty, loneliness, and a past that refused to release him. Kaelin often walked the halls silently, his presence felt even when unseen. Sometimes, Elara would catch him watching her, as she cared for Bren, the child's laughter ringing softly through the chambers. And when he did speak, his words were measured, deliberate, yet carrying weight she could not ignore. "You are stronger than you think," he said one evening, his eyes fixed on hers as they watched the sun sink behind the forest. "You protect him with everything you have. That is rare." Elara's gaze dropped to her son. "I do not know if I am enough," she admitted softly, her voice trembling despite her efforts to hide it. "Everything feels too heavy, too much." Kaelin stepped closer, the faint glow of his eyes catching the dying light. "You are enough," he said firmly, "and I will not let anything harm him while I draw breath. That is my promise." The words felt like fire and ice, at once comforting, yet intimidating. Elara could sense the strength behind them, a force that could crush mountains or protect them with equal intensity. She wanted to trust him, but the fear of being powerless in this strange, dangerous world lingered like a shadow. The castle itself seemed to test her at every turn. Hidden doors, echoing halls, and secret passages reminded her that Kaelin's world was not the one she had known. Every night, she lay awake in her chamber, listening to the distant howls of wolves, wondering if she would ever feel truly safe. Bren slept in a small cradle near the window, and she watched his chest rise and fall, each breath a fragile thread of hope. One night, as the wind whispered through the cracks in the stone walls, Kaelin appeared at her door. His movements were silent, deliberate. The faint scent of the forest clung to him, earthy and wild. Elara tensed, instinctively holding Bren closer, but he made no threatening gesture. "You should rest," he said softly, his voice carrying an unfamiliar gentleness. "You cannot protect him if you wear yourself thin." "I cannot stop thinking," Elara replied, her voice barely a whisper. Kaelin stepped into the room, kneeling at a distance that respected her space but closed enough to feel the intensity of his presence. "The world beyond these walls is dangerous," he said, "but inside, there is a chance for safety, for understanding, for trust." Elara's heart stirred at the words. Trust had been a stranger in her life, a fragile dream that had always been shattered by betrayal and loss. And yet, here was someone who offered it freely, without demand. Yet the question lingered. Why him? Why had he chosen her? And why did he care for her and the child? The following days brought unexpected trials. A rival faction threatened the borders of Kaelin's kingdom, and rumors of rebellion stirred in the villages. Kaelin prepared for battle, and Elara, though hesitant, realized she could not remain a passive observer. She had to learn the ways of the castle, understand its secrets, and protect Bren at all costs. Kaelin noticed her determination. "You are learning," he said one morning, his eyes observing her as she studied the maps of the kingdom. "You do not follow orders blindly. That is rare. You will need that strength." Elara looked up, meeting his gaze. "I have no choice," she admitted. "If I fail, we will not survive." Kaelin's expression softened, though his eyes still held the sharp edge of the wolf within. "And that is why you are strong. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the will to move forward despite it." As days turned into nights, their interactions grew more complex. There were moments of tension, when Kaelin's authority and her defiance collided like storms against stone. And there were moments of quiet intimacy, when the baby's laughter or a shared silence revealed layers of vulnerability neither wished to speak aloud. One evening, Kaelin led her to the balcony overlooking the forest. The moon hung low, casting silver light across the treetops. Bren slept peacefully in her arms, and for a moment, the world seemed to pause. "You wonder about the future," Kaelin said, his voice barely above the wind. "And you should. Every choice you make now shapes it. But do not let fear chain your heart. Courage, compassion, and love are stronger than you imagine." Alara looked at him, her eyes searching for the truth behind the words. "Do you ever feel alone?" she asked softly, the question slipping past her defenses. Kaelin's eyes darkened for a moment, and he looked out at the forest instead of answering directly. "I have walked centuries alone," he said finally. "I have seen kingdoms rise and fall, watched countless faces fade from memory. Loneliness is a constant companion, until someone enters your life and changes everything." The words struck her with a strange intensity. For the first time, she saw Kaelin not as the fearsome Lycan king, but as a man burdened by time, responsibility, and loss. A man capable of love, of care, and of connection. And perhaps, if fate allowed, someone who could share in her own pain and hopes. But their fragile bond was tested almost immediately. Whispers of rebellion reached the castle walls, carried by spies and wandering traders. Some sought to challenge Kaelin's authority, questioning why he would harbor a human woman and her child. Others coveted the baby, sensing a connection to the Lycan king's ancient bloodline. Kaelin's demeanor shifted, the wolf within him stirring at the scent of threat. "You must remain vigilant," he warned. "The world will not accept what we have. They will try to take him, to take you, and I will not forgive failure." Alara tightened her hold on Bren, feeling the weight of responsibility heavier than ever. I understand," she said, her voice trembling. "I will not let anything happen to him." The days that followed were a mixture of preparation and tension. Kaelin trained her in basic defense, teaching her to read danger and move with awareness. He never demanded more than she could give, but every lesson carried the subtle weight of expectation, testing her courage, resilience, and determination. One night, during a patrol along the castle walls, Kaelin allowed her to walk beside him. The moonlight reflected off the battlements, casting long shadows over the courtyard below. The forest stretched endlessly beyond, dark and mysterious, filled with secrets and unseen eyes. "You are learning," Kaelin said quietly, "not just to survive, but to protect. That is rare. That is strength." Alara's gaze lingered on the forest. "I do not feel strong," she admitted. "I feel like I am holding on to a thread, praying it does not snap." Kaelin's hand brushed hers briefly, almost unintentionally, and she felt the heat of his presence. "Strength is not always visible," he said. "It is in the choices you make, the love you hold, and the courage to face fear." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of rain and distant wolves. The castle seemed to hold its breath, waiting, listening, and for a moment, Alara allowed herself to hope that in this storm of power, danger, and destiny, there might be a place for her and her son, a place where trust, love, and strength could grow. Yet the night was far from calm. As they returned to the inner halls, a shadow moved silently among the torches. Eyes watched them from hidden corners. A threat lingered at the edges of their world, unseen but present, ready to strike when least expected. Kaelin's gaze hardened, and the faint glow of his eyes warned of the wolf within him. "They will come," he said quietly, more to himself than to her, "and we must be ready." Quote, Ilara clutched Bren closer, her heart pounding. Fear, courage, and something else, something unspoken, something deep, swirled inside her. The storm outside was nothing compared to the storm within the castle walls. And as she looked at Kaelin, standing tall, vigilant, and commanding, she realized that their fates were now intertwined, bound by danger, trust, and the fragile beginnings of a bond she could not yet name. The night stretched long, filled with whispered fears, silent determination, and the first sparks of understanding between a human woman and the Lycan king who had claimed her and her child. Their journey was just beginning, and the shadows of the heart held more secrets than either of them could yet imagine. The forest surrounding Kaelin's castle was alive with secrets. Moonlight dripped through the branches like silver water, painting shadows on the ground that twisted and danced with every rustle of leaves. Ilara moved carefully, holding Bren close. The baby's warmth, a fragile comfort against the chill of night. The air was thick with tension. The threat that lingered at the edge of their world had grown stronger, and Kaelin's presence beside her was both reassurance and warning. Stay close, Kaelin said, his voice low, carrying the subtle growl of his wolf form beneath the surface. His eyes glimmered faintly in the darkness, reflecting the moonlight like twin shards of ice. The forest is not empty tonight. There are eyes watching us. Ilara nodded, her heart beating fast. The weight of responsibility pressed on her chest. Every rustle of leaves, every distant howl of a wolf, made her grip Bren tighter. She had learned to trust Kaelin, though the trust was fragile, built on moments of protection, respect, and unspoken understanding. And yet, the danger they faced was real, more dangerous than she could have imagined when she first arrived at the castle. Kaelin moved like a shadow, silent and precise, guiding her through the forest's hidden paths. The child slept against her chest, unaware of the dangers that surrounded them. Ilara marveled at the king's strength, his command over the land and its creatures. But she also saw his restraint. He could have left her to fend for herself, yet he had chosen to protect them both. You are learning, he said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. Not just to survive, but to move through danger with awareness. That is rare in one so young, and it is why I watch you closely. Ilara's voice trembled. I do not feel ready. I fear for Bren, and for myself. Kaelin's gaze softened, but the sharp edge of his wolf form remained in his eyes. Fear is natural. It is the courage to face it that defines you. You are stronger than you know, Ilara. Remember that. The moonlight guided them to a clearing, where the grass shimmered like frost despite the warmth of the night. Here, Kaelin stopped and knelt beside her, studying the baby. Bren stirred, opening sleepy eyes that seemed to look straight into the king's soul. Kaelin's fingers brushed the child's forehead gently, a rare softness that made Ilara's chest ache. There is a reason the child came to me, Kaelin said, his voice barely above a whisper. The blood he carries may hold the key to the curse that binds my line. He is more important than you realize. Ilara's heart tightened. A curse? She asked. What do you mean? Kaelin looked away, the shadows of the forest reflecting in his glowing eyes. My family has been cursed for centuries. It is a darkness that touches all we love, a weight we cannot escape. Ilara's mind raced. The baby she had struggled to protect, the son she had fought to keep safe, was now tied to a fate far greater than she had imagined. And yet, Kaelin's tone was not fearful, it was determined. He would not allow harm to come to Bren, no matter the cost. Suddenly, a movement in the shadows caught their attention. Kaelin's posture shifted instantly, muscles coiled and ready. Stay behind me, he ordered, the wolf in him sharpening with instinctive precision. Ilara obeyed, heart pounding, as the figure stepped into the clearing. It was a messenger from the rival faction, a scout who had slipped past the outer defenses. He bowed quickly, trembling under Kaelin's gaze. "My lord, I bring word. There are those who know of the child's importance. They will come to take him. They will not hesitate." Kaelin's expression hardened, the glow in his eyes intensifying. "Then, they will meet the consequences of crossing me," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "They do not understand what they face." Ilara felt a mixture of fear and awe. The king was terrifying in moments like this, a force of nature that seemed impossible to resist. Yet, she also felt a strange sense of safety. With him, she and Bren could survive anything, but she also understood the cost. Kaelin carried centuries of anger, grief, and power. And now, it was all focused on protecting them. That night, back in the castle, Ilara could not sleep. She watched Bren sleep, listening to the faint rustle of the wind against the stone walls. Kaelin stood by the window, his silhouette tall and commanding, gazing out into the forest as if he could see threats that no one else could. "You are thinking too much," he said suddenly, his voice startling her. "Do not let fear control you. You must learn to trust yourself, and trust me." Ilara turned to face him, her eyes searching his. "I do trust you," she whispered. "But it is not easy. Everything feels dangerous." Kaelin stepped closer, the faint glow in his eyes softening. "The world is dangerous. That will never change. But courage, love, and loyalty can turn danger into strength. You have those qualities, Ilara. You only need to believe in them." Their eyes met, and in that moment, the unspoken tension between them deepened. It was not love in the ordinary sense. It was something more fragile, more powerful, a connection forged in shared fear, shared responsibility, and the quiet understanding that they depended on one another. Days passed, and the threat from the rival faction grew closer. Kaelin prepared for conflict, training his guards, securing the castle, and mapping the forest paths. Ilara, though still inexperienced, began to learn the ways of survival, moving with caution, observing patterns, and understanding the rhythms of the castle and the forest. One evening, Kaelin took her to the hidden gardens behind the castle. Moonlight poured over ancient stone paths, and the scent of night-blooming flowers filled the air. The garden was a place of rare peace, a sanctuary within the fortress of stone and shadows. "Here," Kaelin said, "you can rest for a moment. Even warriors need calm." Ilara sat on the edge of a stone fountain, holding Bren. "It feels almost like home," she said softly, watching the moonlight dance on the water. Kaelin knelt beside her. "Home is not a place," he said, "but a person. It is those you protect, those you love, those who trust you. You are creating a home, even in the darkness." Ilara felt a warmth she had not felt in years. His words, his presence, the quiet intensity in his eyes. It was as though the storm inside her was finally meeting a calm she had never known existed. But even in this rare peace, the curse lingered. Kaelin's eyes betrayed a flicker of worry as he studied her and the child. "The darkness will come," he said softly, almost to himself. "It tests us, tempts us, and threatens everything we hold dear. You must be ready." Ilara shivered, though not from cold. The weight of their situation pressed upon her, but she felt something else too. A growing strength, a resilience she had not recognized before. "I will protect him," she said firmly, "no matter what it takes." Kaelin's gaze softened, the wolf within him quieting for a moment. "I know you will," he said, "and that is why I chose you. Not because you are powerless, but because you are brave, and your heart is true. The child is lucky, and so am I." For a brief moment, the tension between them eased. They were two souls bound by fate, each carrying fears and burdens, yet each finding in the other a mirror of strength and understanding. The night whispered around them, carrying the scent of the forest, the promise of the moon, and the faint echo of the unknown dangers still to come. But the calm was shattered before dawn. A howl rose from the forest, long and deliberate, chilling the air. Kalen's body stiffened instantly, muscles coiled, senses alert. Elara clutched Bren, heart pounding, as Kalen moved to the window, eyes scanning the darkness. "They are coming," he said, his voice low and steady. "Soon, we will face what the forest has kept hidden. We must be ready together." Elara looked at him, seeing the wolf and the man in the same gaze. Fear and longing collided within her, but a spark of determination flared brighter. Whatever came, they would face it side by side. She had learned to trust him, to rely on him. And in doing so, she had discovered a courage she did not know she possessed. The night stretched endlessly, the howl echoing through the trees, carrying a warning and a promise. The trials were only beginning, and the bonds of the heart would be tested like never before. Elara held Bren close, feeling the weight of the future in her arms, and knew that the forest and the curse it hid would soon reveal its power. Dawn broke over the forest, casting pale gold across the castle and the distant hills. The night had been long, filled with tension, whispers of movement in the shadows, and the constant awareness of danger that lingered even in the quiet hours. Elara sat in her chamber, holding Bren close. His tiny hand wrapped around hers, a fragile anchor in a world that felt increasingly unpredictable. She could hear the faint stirring of servants and guards, but the silence of the morning felt heavy, as though the castle itself awaited the coming storm. Kalen stood at the window, watching the forest. His form was imposing, yet there was a vulnerability in the way he held himself, the faint tension in his shoulders, betraying the centuries of responsibility he carried. He had faced many threats in his long life, yet this one felt different. This time, it was not only the kingdom at stake, it was the child. It was Elara. It was the fragile bond that had formed between them. "Elara," he said softly, turning to her. His voice carried a rare gentleness, but the undercurrent of command was unmistakable. "Today we face what the forest has kept hidden. You must be ready, and Bren must remain safe." Elara nodded, determination hardening her features. "I will protect him. I will not let anything happen." Kalen's eyes softened for a moment, a flicker of the man beneath the wolf showing through. "I know you will," he said. "That is why I trust you, and why I need you by my side." The morning sun climbed higher, illuminating the castle walls and the forest beyond. Shadows shifted in the trees, and the wind carried a faint, sinister whisper. The threat they had been preparing for had arrived. From the forest's edge, figures emerged, rival factions, driven by greed and hunger for power. Their intentions were clear. They sought to take the child and, through him, control the Lycan king's line. Kalen moved first. His form shifted, subtle but undeniable, as the wolf within him stirred. Strength and power radiated from him in waves. His eyes glowed with fierce intensity, reflecting the rising sun, and his presence alone seemed to push back the advancing threat. Elara clutched Bren tighter, feeling the raw force of the king's determination. She had never witnessed such controlled power, and a mixture of awe and fear coursed through her. "Stay behind me," Kalen commanded, his voice a low growl that resonated through the stone halls. "No one touches him." Elara obeyed, instinctively moving behind Kalen while keeping Bren secure. Yet she did not feel powerless. The lessons he had taught her, the awareness, the courage, the ability to move with intent, flowed through her. She was no longer just a mother protecting her child. She was part of the force that would face this danger, side by side with the Lycan king. The battle unfolded with a strange rhythm, almost like a dance. Kalen moved with precision, his strength and speed unmatched. Elara watched, heart pounding, as he intercepted every threat with careful, deliberate force, using his wolf form to intimidate and disarm without unnecessary violence. The rival factions faltered, unprepared for the unity and power that Kaelin and Alara embodied together. Yet even as the danger pressed close, the emotional tension between them deepened. Every glance, every brief touch, carried meaning. Kaelin's eyes met hers across the chaos, and in that gaze, there was not only command, but acknowledgement of the bond they had forged. She felt a warmth amidst the fear, a quiet promise that they were no longer alone. Finally, the last of the intruders fell back into the forest, retreating from the impossible strength and unity they faced. Kaelin's form slowly shifted back to human, his breath heavy but controlled. He turned to Alara, and in that moment, the full weight of what they had endured pressed upon both of them. "You were brave," Kaelin said quietly, stepping closer. "More than I could have imagined. You have strength and heart." No, 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 no. Alara's chest rose and fell rapidly. She had faced fear, danger, and uncertainty, and she had survived. Yet her heart was drawn irresistibly toward him, toward the wolf and the man who had protected them, taught her, and, in ways unspoken, touched her soul. "And you," she whispered, "are more than I ever expected, both fierce and kind." Kaelin's eyes softened further, the wolf within him quieting. "I thought I could face the curse alone," he admitted. "I thought centuries of isolation had hardened me beyond care, but you, and him." He gestured to Bren, who had watched the aftermath with innocent curiosity. Alara felt a flutter of hope and fear intertwined. "Changed. How?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "By reminding me what it means to be human," he said. "To feel, to trust, to protect, to love. I thought those things were lost to me, but you have brought them back." The words struck her deeply. She had arrived at his castle as a pawn, a woman sold to settle debts. Yet here she stood, no longer helpless, no longer afraid. She was a protector, a partner, and in the quiet intensity of the morning, she realized the bond between them was undeniable. Kaelin knelt beside her, his hand brushing hers, a gesture both intimate and solemn. "I am yours," he said, voice steady but filled with emotion, "as father to him, as protector, and as something more. I am yours, Alara." Tears welled in her eyes, not from fear, but from the overwhelming relief and connection she felt. She had survived storms, darkness, and threats. Yet it was this the acknowledgement of trust, strength, and bond that truly unburdened her heart. I trust you," she said softly, wrapping her arms around Bren, holding him close. "And I believe in you." The morning light spilled over them, illuminating the castle, the gardens, and the forest beyond. The air was filled with the scent of earth and leaves, fresh and alive, carrying a quiet promise of new beginnings. Kaelin rose, holding Alara's gaze, and together they moved toward the balcony overlooking the forest. For a moment, silence fell, a calm that had been hard-won through fear, struggle, and courage. The forest stretched endlessly, yet the shadow of danger no longer felt oppressive. They had faced it together, and the bond between them had been forged in fire and trust. "The curse is not fully broken," Kaelin said quietly, almost to himself. "But together, we can face whatever comes next." Alara's heart swelled. She understood now that their journey was not about avoiding danger, but about meeting it together. The child, the forest, the castle, they were all parts of a story that was larger than any one of them, yet each of them mattered. As Bren stirred and looked up at Kaelin, the king's expression softened completely. He knelt to the child's level, his hands gentle, almost reverent. "You are the bridge," he said softly. "The reason we can overcome what has haunted me for centuries, and I will protect you, no matter the cost." Elara watched, her heart full. The man she had feared, the legend she had thought untouchable, was here, present, human, and vulnerable, in a way only she had witnessed. And in that moment, she understood the truth of Kaelin's promise. He would be father and husband both, not out of obligation, but out of choice, trust, and love. The castle's halls, once oppressive and cold, now felt like the beginnings of home. The threat from the rival faction had been repelled, yet the memory of danger lingered, a reminder that life could change in an instant. Elara held Bren close, and Kaelin placed a hand over hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. "You are my home," Kaelin said softly, voice carrying both awe and certainty. "You are the reason I can be more than the curse. You and him have saved me in ways I did not know I needed." Tears slid down Elara's cheeks, not from fear, but from the profound weight of the bond they shared. She had been sold, powerless, and afraid. Now she stood beside a king, protector, and wolf, and she had discovered courage, love, and the strength to shape her own destiny. The morning sun climbed higher, and with it, the forest seemed to sigh, leaves shimmering, birds stirring, and the air alive with the scent of earth and renewal. Kaelin stood beside her, Bren between them, and the three of them looked out over the world with a quiet determination. The curse might still linger, but the heart of the wolf had been tamed, not by chains, but by trust, courage, and the unbreakable bond of family. And in that moment, the Lycan King's vow rang true, echoing across the forest and the castle walls. "I am yours, as father, as husband, as your wolf." The wind carried their names into legend, and the story of Elara, Bren, and Kaelin began a new chapter, a tale of strength, love, and redemption, forged in shadows and illuminated by trust.